So, hello everyone. I am Sarah Mujek. I am a project manager at Think, a French think tank, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this session. So basically, for the next hour and a half, we will discuss and debate together the scenarios of storage and non-storage of personal data in the case of MyData project implementation by public services. Let me just have a look at the participant. Yes, Yana is here. Hello, Yana. In order to discuss this topic, we will have the pleasure of hearing 5 speakers. So we have Maria Inés, we have Nicolas, we have Benjamin. I will do quite further presentations later on. And we have 2 contributors, actually our witnesses, who are Yana and Chloe, who will contribute and tell us more about CITRA's and specifically IHAN project position and vision regarding this particular issue of storage or not storage, and also La Banque des Territoires, which is also another French institution represented by Chloe. So please do not hesitate actually to start already putting your questions or your comment on the chat of the Zoom discussion. I will try to follow your comment and your questions all along the different presentations. And when we will come to the final part of this session, which is the Q&A, I'll ask our presenters the questions or share with them your comment. Yes, so as I was saying, the idea is to approach the MyData model from a public services perspective, especially the local government, what we call in France collectivité territoriale. And actually, at FING, we had the chance to work and to accompany, to support some of the leading cities in France to start implementing projects regarding MyData project. But this scenario of the cities implementing the MyData was not obvious from the beginning. When we started a few years ago, something like 7 years ago already, it was the idea was really started from a trust crisis perspective and the question of how to restore trust thanks to giving back the data to the individuals. And few experimentations later and GDPR later that changed a lot of things in the context. We had this question of, okay, now that we have experimented and we answered many of the questions, that main question is who is going, to really handle this whole model and to start implementing it. And in 2018, we really had this kind of intuition of, okay, it could be the cities, because as cities, they have this position of being data holders, being actors of the innovation, and also being a democratic institution able to have a dialogue with citizens and to include the citizens in the reflection, in the work around MyData project. That because of this position, we thought that cities, could be a kind of legitimate actor to start implementing MyData project and MyData initiatives. And then we started doing this self-data territorial project, and I'm very happy today because we have partners we worked with on this project who are going to tell us more about why implementing MyData self-data model project, to tell us more how it happened actually, and maybe what next. So given the floor to our speakers, maybe I'm going to start with Benjamin André. So Benjamin is the CEO and co-founder of Cozy. Cozy Cloud, that maybe many of you have heard about, because it's definitely one of the leading platform and one of those who really embodies the MyData model, and we had the pleasure to work with since years. So Benjamin, happy to give you the floor so you can tell us more about how you started this whole adventure of MyData self-data model.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, the idea is to give you an overview, the elements of our journey. How did we become Cozy? How did we start? What is the key points on our journey to realize the opportunities and the ambition of what can be done with MyData or self-data approach. And that's the aim of this 10 minutes discussion, so that I can explain how we reach this way to understand that we can provide a personal data platform to empower individuals. How can we today have this kind of statement? What is our story? And to explain this story, well, in fact, I will start from the end, because understanding the end, I think, is very important to get why, in fact, this starting point was possible. So, what is the end? Where we are today? We are a 20 people team. We raised a bit, something like 9 million. We have many partners, and the story we see today is that the Cozy story is the way we explain the Cozy story is that today all organizations are deadly threatened by new incomers, by new digital players. This is an obvious statement, but what is not obvious is to understand why those new players can compete against brick and mortars. And the reason why, from our point of view, those new players can compete, can challenge brick and mortars, is that they know brick and mortars users and clients better than brick and mortars. When Facebook can patent a way to credit score their users, it's not because they have hired some good bankers, but it's because they have a better understanding of banks' clients than banks themselves. And I like to say that it's not that they know their clients because they have just more data. It's because they have a broad range of data. They have access to your digital intimacy, and thanks to this digital intimacy, they can be relevant against all classical brick and mortar players. So to stay in the race, all organizations need to gain more digital intimacy with their customers, with their users. But obviously, you need to reach this digital intimacy without going through those who already have this digital intimacy. If you need Facebook Messenger or WeChat or any big platforms to access your clients, and well, obviously, you will be intermediated, and at least it will be expensive. So to find a solution to this problem, let's go back to the user. Let's go back to early, I would say at the beginning of this century, when the web was made of only few platforms. But things have changed a lot. Today, each step of your daily life has a digital counterpart, and whatever you do, go in holidays, organize a cinema session with your friends, where if you want to organize the the interaction with your finance, public sectors, connected devices. Well, all of those steps require some digital interactions with all those players. And in fact, whereas those big platforms advantage is to provide you an integrated service, your digital life, on the opposite, became more and more fragmented. Your digital daily life is a nightmare of passwords, of downloads, backups, sharings, and in the end, you have more and more complexity to deal with. So in fact, as a user, what I expect is to find a solution to provide me a cross-silo experience, some services independent from the constraints of the interest of those silos. And that was the approach of Cozy, to say, well, only the individual can be this platform, because only the individual, in one hand, has the password. So only the individual has the keys to open all those silos. And second, but it was not the case when we started, today we have the law, the portability right, especially in the GDPR. And so the idea of this introduction was to say, when I state today this story, and I say we want to empower the individual by bringing them their own personal data storage, personal data cloud, personal data bank, in which he can aggregate all his data to have more, not only control, but more usage of your data. And I will explain later on what kind of possibility it offers. Did we start with all this vision? And obviously, no. When I started Cozy in 2011, but the story began a bit earlier even. In fact, the journey of the idea, of the concept, started in 2006. I had another startup at this time, and I kept some servers of this startup because I was fed up with having to connect to each of my banks to have access to my data. So I developed my own first connectors to aggregate my bank data. And I understood that I needed a trust place where to put this service. And that's why I began to develop the first steps of what was to become Cozy. I experienced the service of aggregating my bank's data, but also my files, in order to share them, to backup. And in my family, there was some obvious storage and backup problems, like in every family, I guess. And little by little, I made this journey, which started with a company. So we started the company in 2012, but for geeks. So at this time, there was no GDPR, there was no Snowden. It was much earlier than all of those major steps. And we did not even imagine that we could not imagine that this kind of concept could interest more than geeks. But little by little, we discovered the power of usage, and it is very important, and that's the last point. We understood that regarding the business models, there was a big opportunity because today, classical players are threatened by new players. So banks, insurance, telcos, retailers, all those companies, all those activities are threatened and they need new paradigm. And when you have this kind of threat against major players, I would say that the alternatives can become mainstream. And that's our approach. We could not imagine when we started about 10 years ago, even more regarding the idea. It was not possible to imagine all this, but that's many steps were required so that today we can have this kind of story. And saying that it's relevant to provide the individual a cozy digital home so that he can be empowered by his data, and that we can bring to trusted third party a new business model, I would say personal data bank business model, so that those trusted third party can become the pivot point between the user and all the services. So that's more or less the way that we took in order to explain where we are today.
Thank you, Benjamin. In fact, it's interesting to see actually the genesis of Cozy and how you ended up doing what you are doing today. Maybe then to go further, I will ask, I will give the floor to Maria Inés, Leal, and Nicolas Pernoud from Lyon City. So Maria Inés is Digital Innovation Project Manager in Personal Data and Digital Identity, and Nicolas is a software engineer, and he's currently designing the technical architecture of MyData use cases at Le Grand Lyon Métropole. So what you have to know, I'm saying that for our participant, is that definitely Lyon is one of the most advanced cities in France in terms of data strategies and then MyData use cases. They are doing a lot of project and implementing initiatives. I had the chance to work with them, and it's definitely very interesting to see what they are doing, and today to hear from them. So I'm giving you actually the floor so you can tell us actually how it started, this whole idea in Lyon Metropole. So maybe starting with Maria Inés.
Thanks, Sarah. So welcome everyone. I hope that you're all enjoying this time. So I work in Lyon Metropole as MyData project manager. I'll share my screen up very fast. Okay. So in Lyon Metropole, we have been working on MyData since 2015. And we started, it was really a crazy idea for all my colleagues. We started and it was really like this. MyData was a very unreachable thing, very crazy. It was really like an ovni. And I still have colleagues that think that MyData is very abstract and doesn't really make very clear ideas. But the reality is that everyone realizes that there is a very real problem. We don't have control of our digital life. So when Lyon Metropole was created in 2015, we started to create new digital services for our citizens. And by doing so, we started collecting personal data. And the process of discovering the trust crisis, it really took some time. Because at the beginning, we think, and we are a public service, so we are allowed by our nature to collect personal data and do whatever is needed to provide a service because we have the user's interest in mind. But the problem is that everybody believes the same thing. If I put this statement, we are, insert any name of any private company. So we are allowed by our nature to do whatever we need with personal data to provide a service. And that's the problem, is that we think that we are allowed to do it and that we have the user interest in mind. But the reality is that behind we have all kinds of interests. We have economical, political, and so on. And one of the things that we used to justify in our work is that, but the reality is that the user doesn't really care about to regain control over their data. They just want to have a service and they don't really care how it's done or anything. But the reality is that we see today that users are concerned about it. The real question is now, how can we actually put the user in the center as a public service? And how can we provide services that do this purpose? How can we create a relationship of trust with the users as a public service? So MyData was the answer. It really brings down the barriers. And even if it was a crazy and abstract idea, but as you are probably here today, you believe that this crazy idea it's actually an answer to this problem. And well, the project that we did with Lafing and with COSI and with other stakeholders, Mesinfo, it really confirmed the interest to follow up. And now today we are developing other services. Maybe I'll let Nicolas go further on these ideas, how we started.
Okay, can you switch to the diapo, the one with open data? Yeah, that one, thanks. Hello everyone, I'm Nicolas Pernoud. I'm a software architect at Lyon Metropole and currently in charge of designing all the technical aspects about MyData. So we work very closely with Inés on all the subjects for quite two or 3 years, but no, so that's quite a lot of time. And so at Lyon Metropole, we've done open data for quite a long time. We've got a platform which is called data.grandlyon.com, which can provide a lot of public data for citizens, for companies, for example, traffic data, mobility data, whatever, even the trees and the maps and so on. And for a time, we thought, okay, we've got that nice open data platform. Maybe we can put some personal data in it. We've got a big data lake, infrastructure, and so on. And we thought, okay, let's see if we can comply with GDPR that way. And we work out that we could not allow the users to use their rights correctly. For example, in a data lake, a user cannot delete his data, he cannot get it back, and we cannot ensure that everything is GDPR compliant. And so we thought maybe we can find another way and put not the data in the center, but the user in the center and work something out that way. And obviously we exchange a lot with COSI and so on, and the thing and all the partners that are here today. And we thought that a MyData or self-data platform, which reversed the way the data was used, was really a good solution to provide GDPR compliancy, but as well to provide a great user experience, because we can put the user and the user services in the center. So that's all for now. Maybe Inés, you can switch to the demonstration, and I will give a little more insight after.
Yeah. So we just to give a quick brief, MyData in Lyon Metropole was considering all these ideas. We wanted to put the user in the center with this new breed of IT, but also having in mind data for common good. And do you remember I spoke about different purposes behind it? So just a quick note on this. We believe that MyData should be used with public code, and if everything that we've done, it is public and it's accessible in our Forge, in our Git, that it's forge.grandlyon.com. So a quick brief, we'll do a short demo, and of course, don't hesitate to ask many questions. This is a service, Ecolio. It's a service that is today in production and accessible. We are testing it. So MyData, Ecolio is a service that basically lets you have all your energy and water consumption in a same platform, in a dashboard, and that gives you challenges and eco-positive behaviors. So eco-positive actions, so you can change your behavior, and it's in a very fun way. That's what we are looking for. We are looking to bring a new public that it's kind of far from ecological transition issues that we have today. So just to give a quick demo on this. So here we have the COSI of Lyon Metropole, that it's accessible today in production, and you have the service Ecolio here. So we have a problem with one of the data, but this is a real-time demo. So we see that here, for example, this is my dashboard with that collects my 3 fluids: electricity, water, and gas. So of course there is a problem with gas, but for example, if we go back to the 6th of December, we have all the 3 of them. And you see how much you spent, how much it costed you that day. Also, you can check in detail. For example, if you want to check in detail with electricity, you can check it by day, by month, by year, by half an hour. Only electricity allows you to do this. It's an API that was that it's used for this. It's an API from Enedis, our electricity provider in France. And you can also compare yourself to last year. And we have a problem of, it doesn't show anyway. Sorry. You can compare yourself, and of course you can go and check the other fluids. And for some reason there are gaps, because that's how it is. We have APIs that are still in development, and we have to also we are working on it basically. But I just wanted to give you like a very real demo on how it is. You have these challenges basically that you can launch yourself. Now it doesn't let me do it because I don't have enough data. But if I disconnect, if I do this, and if I disconnect this one, it should work. Not even so. Okay, this is okay. Let's try one more time. Okay, I'm sorry. I won't be able to show you how that you can launch it. Still a work in process. There you go, we can now. So imagine that you launch it only with electricity because you don't have enough data. We are working on to solve that problem. But the idea is that in the next 7 days, you can consume less than the last 7 days. And then you have these superpowers that will help you to accomplish your challenge. For example, invisibility cape, that's just a funny name to say disconnect your internet box. And so on. So as I said, we are working on it. We are testing it in a small. Here is the time of the challenge. We are testing it in a small perimeter of beta testers, but you can today access it if you want. And the last project is Pilot. It's a Pilotement Suivi MDM. It's a dashboard that helps the user to know how to advance in his social processes. It's addressed specifically to the users of the social services of Lyon Metropole when they need to go. Usually, when they need to go and have for example, a social help, a reduction or something, they go and see these social workers and they have a meeting and they say, okay, let's meet in 1 month and you will have to bring me all these documents and write, I don't know how many letters. And 1 month later, the user is like, I don't know what I needed to do. Like, let's face it, administrative work is complex. And I can tell you in France, it's 10 times worse. So just to give you a brief demo, we have two front. Basically, there are 2 apps. There is this one that it's in the Cozy, and this is the dashboard of the user. This is the access of the agent. In order to have, basically, the idea is that the user, when he arrives in a meeting, he will ask the agent will ask him to access his dashboard so they can speak about everything that they were able to do in the past month. So, for example, I will log in as an agent today. Up. And I'll ask to access this cozy, that it's this cozy, and I will receive in live a code as a user that I'll have to share to the agent in order for him to access. So I write my code here. And it's a very tricky code. Okay. But now, as an agent, I am connected to the cozy that it's of the user. And I can edit it. I can add, for example, here we have, and of course it's translated because my dashboard is in Spanish. So here we have the things that the user had to do. As an agent, I can add something new, like for example, contact equipe pilot, and I can add the contact up. I can also add a new objective. For example, find a new job. So I have a new, and for example, I'll ask him to bring old work contract up. And of course it's a contract, so I'll bring it. And as a user, if I just refresh it, I'll see how it's already refreshed with the new information that is asked. And I can, for example, click there to bring a document, and as they're asking me an ID, it turns out that I have already an ID in my cloud, so I'll use that one. But if I don't want to use that one because I need another one, so I just go there. I can either take a picture, and for example, I'll just choose this one, and zoom, sorry, up. And I say that it is an ID. And probably it doesn't let me do it because I have the same document already stored. Anyway, so I can also look at the document and see if it's that the one I wanted to take. And I just put it. And I can see that the document is already there. So I can, as an agent, I can actually look at it. Up. And so this is the idea, is to create just a space where both they can interact and they can exchange. They can speak about everything that it's advancing. The user has really a very accessible space where he can have his specific documents. And let's take a look at it. The agent doesn't have access to other documents because a person might have in his Cozy Cloud, as you know, probably know there is a drive in the Cozy Cloud where you can have other kinds of documents. And the user doesn't have access to that. So these are very real services that exist today. And just to show the idea, the point, it was also to show that MyData as a public service, it's very real, it's happening today. And just to encourage you into doing that.
Thank you, Inés. And I think that the idea is that to go further with Lyon project with Nicolas. That's it?
Yes, I'll just give a few more insight on the technological point of view. Inés, can you share again the presentation with the slide?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds. Up.
The one with the white and white dots. Right, that one. I just wanted to give you a quick insight on why we chose Cozy, because there is other platform which can do quite same thing, but we chose Cozy because first of all because it works. It was technically mature. It actually make a lot of opinionated choices about security, data flow, and so on. And so it's easy for the developers to concentrate on the business logic, what we can provide for the users, and not to concentrate so much on the security and design, which is very hard in that kind of application, because it's very personal data, and that's why we chose that system, which is very production ready. But the main point for us, it was that Cozy was open source, and it's very important for us at Lyon Metropole that we use open source software, because it can provide transparency and digital sovereignty, and that's very important for us. It's very compatible with the civil service action for greater good ID, and that's what we stand for at Lyon Metropole. But obviously, every civil servant in the world should stand by that. And it's very convenient. Open source is actually very convenient to work with, because it's convenient for developers. It's easy to find help, resources. It's an open technology market, and we can find a lot of resources that way. It's convenient for public collaboration. I can share something, a development, an ID with another city, and we're not bothered by licenses and costs and so on. It's very, very convenient to collaborate that way. And to some extent, it is cheaper, because it's free to experience, it's free to develop. Obviously, it's not free to scale, because we actually have a market with Cozy to be able to scale for thousands of users, and that's not free, and that's normal. But to start is free, and that's important, because when you design a MyData product, it's quite difficult to convince political guys that actually can work, and so the initial investment should be very, very minimal. So as Inés said, so far everything we've done is in our forge.grandlyon.com, including the two applications that Inés demonstrated. So feel free to pick up, to elaborate, to do merge requests and so on. And feel free to reach to us if you want some insight on how we've done it.
Thank you, Nicolas. So now question to Benjamin. Why did you start collaborating with cities? What was the reason for, picking? I guess that many people want to collaborate with you, so why cities particularly?
Cities, I would say public sector. At the beginning, we did not interact much with public sector. Our first, as I said, the first audience, but at the very beginning we were targeting, I would say, geek people, before we understood that there was a real meaning for this kind of service for anybody, and that's why today our mission is much broader. We want to democratize the personal data space, the personal data cloud. But we started maybe more with companies. It was, in fact, with Mesinfo that it started, where we discovered that public sector had this problem of trust, because they need personal data, but how can they pretend to access to all your data? When Maria Inés shows Ecolio, how a public sector can say, I need all your geolocation, all the data from your energy consumption, some of your invoices, so that I can make carbon estimation, and in order to drive your behavior. It's sensitive. I would say it's a kind of contract between the citizen and the state, that the state does not know everything about you. It does not have access to your digital intimacy. It's, I would say, contrary to the contract between the state and the citizen. And that's why we discovered that they needed a neutral space, a space owned by the user, where they can provide the service, where Ecolio can be run to access the data without having to send the data to the service. When you run Ecolio in your personal cloud, Ecolio has access to the data, but the data remains into the personal cloud. You don't send to the town of Lyon, the city of Lyon. You don't send to the city your data. So you have the benefit of the service without having to disclose your data. The service can leverage your digital intimacy without having to share, without having to request to the user the consent to share the data to provide the service. And this has many applications. We have seen two very good examples with Maria Inés regarding energy, or the interactions between the civil servant and an individual, a citizen, around, I would say, an administrative form, and the need to exchange data in order to help individuals in this digital world. And we have other projects regarding this aspect of empowering poor people having problems to secure their data. When you have a physical environment which is not secure, you have a digital problem, and this digital problem increase your problems in the physical space. When you lose your passwords, when you no longer have access to your documents, well, it's a big problem, in fact, for citizens. But I will mention another sector, another public sector where this there are a lot of benefits for their citizens, for their for their users to have their own personal cloud. It's in the education area for pupils, for students, because a student is a pupil, is a person who needs to be empowered by a digital personalized system, so that you can have some specific lessons, readings, questions, tests, taken into account all of your educational points, data. And for this, all those data points are very sensitive. Just imagine you would share this data with, let's say, Microsoft. Microsoft, with the owner of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the orchestrator of the work market, the job market. If LinkedIn was to understand that, well, maybe you have some dyslexia due to that you can detect into into your tests, then you will have a kind of determination into those services, a kind of anticipation of what is relevant or not regarding your job, and it's a problem for the education sector. So they need to provide to students the power, the promise of the digital personalization and empowerment. They need a digital space controlled, owned by the user. And we have some very, very interesting projects with this public sector. That's the way we started, and the reason why we start with the public sector services.
Thank you, Benjamin. But at the same time, if I have to rely, for example, on the project that we have collaborated on with you and with Lyon, it's not that easy to implement this kind of project on a how to say, with public services. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of barriers. For example, it could be the political support, it could be the resources dedicated to such project and how it is prioritized, etc. What are the challenges that you have experienced?
Well, in fact, the problem we encounter with the public sector is not much different than what we encounter with any players. So the big problem with the approach of empowering putting the individual in capacity to control their data is that it's the reverse model of what is existing today. Today, your data is not into your silo, your data is in other silo and spread across many silos. So when you bring this paradigm to actors, it's a complete new way of thinking, and you have to find the steps between what is their position today to where they can start, so that they can start their journey to this paradigm. So the difficulty is more that our paradigm can be, you need the time to understand the benefits, the constraints, the opportunities, how you can start without interfering with existing services, and how you can little by little add some new interactions between what is existing and what you add into the personal data cloud, the personal cloud. And this is the difficulty. And this difficulty is not really specific to the public sector.
Thank you, Benjamin. And maybe asking the question directly to cities representatives we have today, Nicolas and Inés, what are the challenges that you have experienced with the MyData project?
Actually, the demonstration was very good on that, because you saw that there were things that worked and things that didn't. And what didn't work perfectly was actually the data quality from gotten from the providers, and that is what is hard, because we cannot control what's happening outside our system. And getting the data is collected, created outside our system. And so we've taken a lot of time discussing with our partners to get them to build APIs properly authenticated with OAuth2 flows and OpenID Connect flows and so on. And that's quite difficult, and we are not quite here yet, because as you have seen, sometimes the data is incomplete. Sometimes the connector breaks because the API is not quite stable. And so that's very difficult, because we cannot control what's happening. And the impact on the user is that the onboarding process, making all the data flow and the connectors, getting all the tokens and the IDs and so on, is still very quite rough, to be frank. And it's fine for a user which would be very motivated and want to reduce his emission, but no, it's still difficult to get someone from the public involved with that onboarding process. But we are making progress, and we are managing to coerce some more our partners to improve on that. So we're quite hopeful for the future, but that's still a main point.
Yeah, just to add something in my perspective as a product owner, like as I presented in the beginning, it seems like so crazy and so different as Benjamin explained. It's totally the opposite. So the problem, I would say, it's also how to explain the concept is always a challenge. How to explain why this is different from traditional systems. And when you speak about politicians, it's super hard to just explain it and say in a simple way why it's so different and why we should go on it, knowing that the market is uncertain, knowing that there are many risks, and that today the biggest issue that we have is that in order to industrialize this, we need to find a business model. And today's business models are based on the total opposite, as Benjamin said. So that's for us, I will say, for me, it's the main obstacle is how to find a business model that in a market that allows this ecosystem. That's why it's so key to work with private actors, with all other stakeholders, and to create a local ecosystem. So yeah, I would say that's one of the biggest obstacles.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicolas and Inés. So as I said in the beginning of this session, we have today two contributors. So I am going to introduce our first contributor, Chloe Friedlander. So Chloe worked at FING on a self-data project, and today she is a project manager at Banque des Territoires, Caisse des Dépôts. It's a French financial institution. It's pretty a big fund that support mainly for Banque des Territoires local government. And Chloe conducted a study about the MyData self-data ecosystem in France. And she's going to give us and provide us an overview of this study and tell us what is the role of the local government. So, Chloe.
Thank you, Sarah. As you said, I'm working at Caisse des Dépôts, and we've conducted a study in the first semester of 2020. We've interviewed about 20 experts from the MyData ecosystem. And the question we asked was, is there really a future to the MyData model? I'm sorry, but that was the question of my bosses, because we've supported Mes Infos project since 2012. And they were asking, are things moving since then? And can we invest? Can we do something more? And so we had to conduct a study to see how the ecosystem of the MyData model look like today. So we first needed to build a definition of the MyData model, and ours was based on the combination of, one, the obligations to collect consent, two, the right to portability of personal data, and three, the principle of minimization of the collection of personal data. And then we have to see why is it not developing so fast? So we've identified some obstacles, some barriers. And Inés and Nicolas made a perfect illustration to it. But so we've identified those barriers. One, if there are no services, we will not use our portability rights. Second, if there are no tools to enable data portability, there will be no services. Three, if there are no standards, there will be no tools. And four, if there is no governance, there will be no standards. And then, fortunately, we have seen that some things are moving. There are already services that are developing on the basis of portability. And we've identified aggregators like Linkso or Banking that became really mainstream, like with millions of users. And also we found an estimation of the consent management for enterprise market. And it's estimated today at 199 million euros. And the last point was the development of the MyData infrastructure. We saw it's central to really build the market, and it's the basis of this market. And we think that local authorities are really the best place to develop it, because they are able to bring at the table large companies and also citizens, and they can make them test all technical modalities. They can test the potential for new services, and they can encourage supranational players to deploy this infrastructure at a larger scale. We also saw that the EU recently published this Data Governance Act, and I figure that you will talk a lot about it in this MyData conference. But this is a really good incentive to accelerate the transition. So to conclude, in my point of view, and it's a personal opinion, it's not written in the study, but the development of data portability will happen. It's a matter of time. Where I'm a little bit more concerned is the capacity to develop services that minimize the circulation of personal data. And I think Lyon is really putting its effort on it, and COSI also. And I'm really looking forward to the moment where they will publish calls for developers and for companies to develop services with these principles of minimization. And that's all for me. But if you have further questions, I'm staying here.
Thank you very much, Chloe. And I guess that you can share with us maybe a link or something to this study. If it's...
There is no link at the moment, but it will be published on Monday or Tuesday. And but I will send you the link to our website where you can do the study. But it's in French. I'm sorry, at the moment we didn't translate it.
Well, then French speaker will have like the priority until the English version. But thank you so much for the presentation. And actually, you introduced a good transition to the point that we want to talk about today, which is the storage and not storage. And you were talking actually about the consent management services, and this is like a big part of the non-storage. So my question is probably going to Benjamin. So you have been working with the cities, and of course you face this question and this choice of storage, not storage. So how do you deal with this today, and why the public services are legitimate in this kind of situation? Maybe thinking and about the different options and putting them in place.
Yes, so I will try to detail a bit more what is at stake around storage, around data minimizations, about the responsibilities around this storage. Does storage matter? So maybe just before that, you may have noticed I have a slight French accent, so I will use the slides a little like subtitles. Okay, it will be the way for me to be sure that the accent is not a major obstacle to what I try to express. So what does control your data means? Some says properties defined, limited and enforced by the law. It's the law which is in charge of defining who can do what. So there's one approach around law, and some others says, well, you own your data if you can delete it. Delete it means it's a short way to say that you have, I would say, the physical access to the data, that you have the physical control around your data, and the way to synthesize those two approaches is to say there's a kind of social approach versus, I would say, a physical approach. And the idea is not to oppose it, but to see how they can complete and interact and be complementary. So, no, that's not so. What is the alternative to storage when you expect to have the control over your data? It's about it's the legal approach, the alternative to storage. So you need contracts. You need to consent to the services so that they can access your data. Because obviously, to use a service, the service need to leverage your data. So if you consider only the legal approach of empowering people to control their data, then you need a consent management system so that you can have some contracts, some consents recorded between the individual and the services. And the way to organize those consents can be like it is today, done silos per silo, service per service, and then it's kind of a nightmare. Or you can have some centralized data models enabling to organize the consents and data flows so that different services can request access to data and record the consent so that you have a kind of contract between the individual and the service, so that anytime the individual can leverage law, can leverage his rights to control his data. So what is the advantages of this of the consent architecture? Well, obviously law is your protection, and law is a very good protection. It's obvious. So there's no need to tell that having this kind of contract enforced by the law is key, and the model is very close to the existing one. Well, in fact, when you see the data transfer project organized by Google, Facebook, Apple, and Twitter, the data transfer project is easy to implement. It's not that difficult, and it doesn't really change the deal for existing players. They just have to request the consent. But as you need to consent to have the service, for the service, well, they still have the pressure on you to say, if you don't consent, you don't have the service. So in fact, for services, it's not a big deal. And that's a bit the limit of the consent architecture. Because, well, first, they will require always more data, exactly like your apps on your phone. Each time you have a new update, your apps on your phone will request more and more rights, and you don't have time to really understand why they require access to this or that data. So services will request always more data. Any service is relevant to say, is legitimate to say, well, I will make you a more practical service if I can access to your contacts. It's obvious. So more and more apps and services will request always you more consents. And your data will be more and more disseminated across more and more services. So dissemination is a complexity to deal with for the individual. And in all those silos, they are not robust. Well, for instance, data from a vendor will be lost the day you change of vendor. When you change of telco provider, of a phone operator, then you will lose all your invoices and history of communication. So your data are not robust. And some services will remain impossible only in the consent architecture. For instance, when you need a deep history of data, there are some performance issues, and just data might not be accessible, exactly like I said for the invoice. But it's the same for the example I mentioned before that with the education. If you expect your service across all your life to be proactive regarding the way you learn foreign language, if you want the system to, let's say, improve your skills in English, this system needs to have an overview of your evolution of your English, and it needs a deep history of data to be able to provide this kind of service. And it is not possible when the data are fragmented and not stable in time. And it's also even more important regarding sensitive data. For instance, let's say you want to anticipate Alzheimer. Alzheimer today, you cannot cure Alzheimer, but you can anticipate Alzheimer. And for that, you need, for instance, the data from your car, because the evolution of your behavior on your car can anticipate up to 2 years the diagnostic of Alzheimer. So you need sensitive data. You need the way you behave car, and those data are sensitive because, for instance, if your car parks regularly close to an hospital or a cancer treatment center, it tells a lot about you. So those data are sensitive. And it's difficult to say, okay, I will share those sensitive data with some small and innovative services who could help me to use this data to anticipate Alzheimer. But in the other hand, it's difficult to aggregate all those data to provide it to them, and it's sensitive. So there's a trust problem. And on the opposite, it's true with a small and innovative service, but it's also true with, in fact, the people who today are the most skilled to evaluate your risks regarding a risk service. For instance, your insurer. Your insurer has many data to evaluate your risks. So they are well, from a formal point of view, they are well placed to provide this kind of scoring. But today, would you share your health data with your insurer? Obviously not. So dealing only with consents has some limits. You have to share your data to your services. You have to trust services, so then you can have the benefits of the services. And that's why I like to say that the power of self-storage is that in the digital age, the empowerment is not to consent to share your data, but to have the benefit of the data without having to share them. And that's possible. That's what Maria Inés showed you. You can benefit of Ecolio. You can benefit of a service coaching you regarding the data of your energy consumption. You can have an educational service taking into account all your history of educational data points without having to disclose those data to a third party. If your data is under your control into your personal data space, into your personal cloud, then you can have the services using the data without sending the data outside. I can show you a very quick example.
Benjamin, can I ask you really quickly to do it? Just yes, mindful of time. Thank you.
Yes, so the idea here in your COSI, you can have apps to connect and collect data and consents, but you also can use the data within your COSI, so that when you go into your bank aggregator service and you expect this bank aggregator to, of course, make a dashboard of your data, it can also show you that this health expense has not been reimbursed, whereas this one has 2 reimbursements, and you have the service being able to cross data coming from the bank, coming from the public health insurance, coming from the your private insurance, and this service can use the data without the data being sent outside. So that's really the idea of digital home services. It's home services, but at the digital age, where you can have the benefit of the service without having to send the data outside. And it's relevant to notice that in RUPS, the Tim Berners-Lee startup has chosen the same architecture for this precise reason. So I made the very quick demo. Okay, that's nice to say that, but you still need to trust your digital home, your self-storage, and services you are working with, your banks, your public services, telcos, etc. Still have your retailers, still have your data. So what is the way to deal with the trust of your self-storage? First, of course, you can self-host. You could have your storage at home. I was at the beginning, I said there's the physical control, but even the physical control is a bit of an illusion. You don't control all the software stack that is into your own software. So in fact, self-host is a part of, could be a solution, but it's not, it cannot be mainstream, and it's not a real technical solution. And you still need, of course, the consent and law. You need to consent that this service provider send your data to your personal data space. So you definitely still need consent and law, and that's why into COSI you do have the consent management system. But there are some trust and fair advantage and end-to-end encryption. So, and this is a true, very powerful solution, so that your personal data cloud doesn't know anything about you, because encryption is made on the client side, and then no data can be understood, can be read on the server side. And second, and that's the most important point, is that we can create an ecosystem of trusted players so that users can choose, can make a choice between several actors, for instance, public sector who can provide services, and an ecosystem of trust players who can be the idea is to say that traditional trust players today, such as banks, such as financial services, could enter the digital world by being a digital trust party who is in charge of securizing your personal data bank, and they could become your personal data banker. And in the end, that's because the question is key. What is the role of the public sector? Should the public sector provide personal data storage infrastructure? Is it legitimate? As I said at the beginning, there's a kind of conflict between the idea of the contract of the individual, the citizen, and the state being able to access your digital intimacy. It's not logical in a democratic system. So I think, nevertheless, that there is a relevance opportunities for the public sector to be legitimate to provide such a service. For instance, for some specific audience, for students and pupils, for poor people, for people who don't have enough money to have their own personal data bank. They have a kind of educational responsibility because they know that if they don't participate to this kind of citizen empowerment, then the alternative is that personal data will be more and more widespread across silos, and you have a major sovereignty risk. And they can participate to the ecosystem by respecting the fact that there's an alternative to their service. The problem is not that the public service provide us personal data storage service. The problem would be to be the only personal data storage service. But if it's only one solution into an ecosystem of actors into which the individual can choose, and then it changes everything. That's why one of our motto is you will stay because you can live. And that's why COSI is open source. That's why you can move your COSI from one trusted party to another one. And that's key for the public services to be legitimate to provide this kind of service. And last, what about the law? What about Europe? You may have noticed that 10 days ago, there was this proposal from the EU to create a new rule, a new agreement called the Data Governance Act. This Data Governance Act is about to create the role of new trusted intermediary in charge of helping individuals to leverage their digital rights, the GDPR rights. And they go even as far as to say that it could be desirable to collect actual data within a personal data space so that processing can happen within that space without personal data being transmitted to third parties in order to maximize the protection of personal data of privacy. And that's exactly the idea of storage. If you have the storage, then you can have the service without having to disclose the data, but you still need the consent. So consent and law is key. There's no need to say that consent is an obvious part of a democratic system, but you need storage. If you don't store your data, then you depend on services to access your data, to disclose your data to more and more services. And I think that the answer to storage or not storage, yes, storage, but not without consent, and not consent without storage. Both are really required. That's the main points and to explain this visual idea.
Okay, thank you very much for this presentation. Really interesting, Benjamin. Now I would like actually to ask our second contributor, Jana Sinipuro, project director at Citra, the Finnish Innovation Fund. Can you tell us actually what is the position or the vision of the IHAN project regarding this specific question of storage or not storage of of personal data, specifically when it comes to public services project?
Yes, so thank you. It was very interesting indeed, and I think that I need to congratulate the early pioneers within MyData community of building these use cases and showing that it's possible to create practical solutions for this human-centric data sharing. Maybe because Sitra is Think, Do and Connect and working together or under the Finnish Parliament, it's more logical for us to work on the systemic level and focus on regulations and policymakers and collaboration there. So that's why we defined our Fair Data Economy project as our, or you can see it as a response to the European data strategy. So, and I think I very much agree that we are going to see in a really near future, we need to redefine our thinking about portability and this data storages and data sovereignty, how to make that data portability actionable, how to create those code of conduct enabling data sharing between the companies that will happen. There will, those antitrust trials and all things happening. I think this is something is going to happen. The whole environment will shift, but at the same time, we are focusing at our project maybe more on this ecosystem level and services level, thinking that individuals are maybe a little bit tired or too reluctant to care for adjusting their rights, user rights, and giving control to different service users. So that's why we are focusing more on building the ecosystem capabilities and creating those rule books and soft infrastructure for data sharing. But at the same time, I think that we need different technical approaches to showcase that this is possible, but we need to work at the broader level, at the societal level, saying that actually we need collaboration, both from policymakers, saying that how to adjust the environment and how to make it, because those relevant services for individuals, we think that that's a key for defining incentives for data sharing in the future. And you need to create benefit for the end users, that is individuals. So that's why we need to, and you also, I think, concluded that it's very important with incentives and how to make data flow from different actors to each other. So that's why we need to make data sharing more easy and maybe focus more on services and ecosystem capabilities. So I think we need different approaches, and this Data Governance Act will hopefully create some clearance, because there's these three categories of data intermediaries needed for practical services, needed for sovereignty, and then this broker role. So there's lots of push towards these kind of things, but I think that we need to work at multiple societal levels. And especially we need to make those big companies to see that actually data sharing, giving access to data, and also only gathering the relevant data needed for that specific services, data minimalism is the way to go. And yeah, that's briefly my reflections.
That's what we used to call the BLTS sandwich. Yes. We need the collaboration of different sectors and cross sector collaboration, because each one has a kind of a piece of the puzzle to bring, and then in order to have this whole picture and the whole ecosystem as a serious alternative to the different solutions that are already existing today. Thank you for that, Jana. And maybe I would like now to ask Nicolas and Inés about the position of Lyon regarding this question of storage or not storage.
Okay, I'll start and Inés will complete. Inés, can you share the, yes, not that one, but here we are. Actually, our position on storage or not storage is very practical. At that point, I think that's proven that storage full MyData enabled us to make useful and innovative services, and we hope that we managed to show you some of those services. Storage's data is not there yet. That doesn't mean that it could not. It's not, but for now, it's not in our point of view here yet. We're still a bit worried about the storage-less paradigm and what it means for the user, because storage full MyData, it's very simple to understand. I get everything back from my providers, and I can work from it and build services from it. And that's quite easy to understand for the user. My data is my property. I get it. I put it in a storage space and so on. It's not very elegant, if we can say, because we need to get everything instead of making the data free-flowing. So intellectually, storage-less MyData, it's maybe more elegant, but it's a bit complicated to make that data flow, because in what we've seen up to now, it means something like let's do blockchain and smart contracts to allow data flow and process control, do some control and transparency with that all that smart contracts and blockchain. And so for us, it's not really field proven. It's not really operational right now, but maybe there is project and that we are not aware of. And the other point, and maybe that's the bigger point, it's maybe it would be a bit difficult for the user to get it, what's going on. Storage full data, it's very easy to understand. Storage data, you need to understand what a blockchain is, or at least what it can do. And maybe that could be a problem, or not. Maybe the user needs only to trust whoever provides the infrastructure, and doesn't he or she wouldn't need to know or to understand what's behind. Maybe that's a biased view from my part, because I need to understand to trust, but maybe that's not the way we everyone. So we can let that as an open question. Inés, can you complete maybe?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds managing this. To be honest, I don't think I'll add more to what it's been said. Just we've seen that it is easier also to create new services in this way, because that means that as the user is the one that is in control of their data, and you can provide the service in the security of his cloud, we can imagine things that were not possible to do. Basically, you can't. And we are already making links. I showed you 2 services that are different: energetic transition, energetic control, and the other side you have a social dashboard. And now we are thinking about energetic precarity, how we can mix them up. So there is. This is the powerful idea. Also, you can put the service inside of the cloud. No one accesses it, and I think also in the mindset of the user, that's very different. Knowing that no one accesses your data, and that you can check your energy consumption, your water consumption, your gas consumption without anyone being actually able to access it, and you're doing it by yourself. I think it's a very and with all the debates that we've seen in data collection in energy here in France, it's a very comforting way also to see that you're actually in control, and it's not only a way to just check and know that everybody will still be asking the same amount of data, and as Benjamin said, things will be more spread and so on, which is good also. You need to have the portability happen, and that's needed. But bottom line is that we'll still have all the data that will be flowing everywhere, and you will not be able to say, no, I don't want to share this data with someone else until, for example, if someone gave the example of the insurances. Well, I first want to know what it means for me to access, like to have a contract with this insurance. So I will trim my data, like I will mix my data in the confidentiality of my personal cloud without anyone accessing it. And if I am happy with the result, I'll share it with the insurance. But if I am not, I'll just move to another insurance. And that's the idea, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria, Inés, and Nicolas. Now we have a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes left for some questions and answers and some discussion. Sorry, we're in a little bit out of time. So maybe picking one question that was asked, did you ever do anything in which data is transferred from a city to another? Have you worked on such project? Did you see something like this? Maybe asking Maria, Inés, and Nicolas. Have you worked on a project where data are transferred from city to another city?
No.
And have you ever experienced this case, Benjamin?
Phone connected, disconnected.
Just to answer a little bit from our side, actually we didn't. What we can transfer is the technology, the project with the open source, but the data not yet. And actually, the question would be what would be the point, because if the point is to compare, for example, energy consumption, we can do it actually right now, because our self-data platform is not technically restricted to Lyon. So a citizen from another city, a French city, obviously, because the connectors are connected to our providers, could use all our application, not the pilot one, because it's very it's made for a very specific business case. Ecolio could be used in another city, because the providers, the energy providers, are the same. GRDF is a gas provider for all France, and Enedis is an electricity provider for all France. And so you just need to install the application on a cloud provided by another city, or on your personal cloud, and it would work, and that would be possible to compare energy consumption.
Thank you, Nicolas. Maybe now opening the discussion to our participant. So if anyone has a question, please do not hesitate to open your mic and ask question to our presenters.
And I just wanted to make a comment, because someone said that about the insurance, that it is fraud, what I just said. I work in a public service, to be honest. I did not search. I did not work on the specific case of an insurance service. And as I said, I don't think we have all the answers about MyData. We are working on it. We are testing it. And yeah, maybe the way that I explain it, it might be not the right one. But the idea is not about just to block on it. And the idea is just to search ways to do it. And I am not an expert in insurances. So for sure, I did not provide a very good field example. But that's just the point, is how we create as an insurance service that actually respects users' digital rights. That's the whole point.
Yeah, learning by experimenting, maybe, and searching.
Sarah, may I say something? And I'm the one who put that as fraud in there. And I don't, a little bit intentionally forward, because I think it also shows the level of challenges and challenges that we're going to be facing, particularly when you get things like AI, and I forget which one of the presenters was saying, based on analysis of behaviors or actions. I think there's some recent research saying that measuring step patterns can mean that they seem to think that there's indications of early onset of Alzheimer's, maybe potentially identified. So there's a lot of challenges that we're going to be faced as, and denying knowledge is, if you read any insurance, particularly in the insurance industry, you can't deny it. I mean, if you know it and you end up being in violation of the contract, and your claim will be refused, or you will end up in court, or your family will, or whatever, right? So it's some interesting challenges. One of the other questions I have, I guess, for the COSI, the team, one of my experiences is dealing with previous life experiences dealing in enterprise systems, and saying that your utility, your power usage, your water usage, your gas usage, the utilities need to also hold all of this information. So it's not a case of where information can be completely blown out and stored in everybody's individual repository and not retained within a corporate instance. Because for simple things like running a billing cycle, I don't believe any remote system is anywhere near performant, or decentralized system is anywhere near performant compared to a centralized system for something like a billing application, where they have 2 hours to generate 1 million bills, things of that nature. So how are you guys dealing with some of these practical realities from the business side? If we say we want to decentralize and have our own data repository, how are you dealing with that?
Benjamin, do you want to answer this question?
I completely lost the sound.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. No, I can.
So
I'm sorry, there was a 2 minutes gap in my sound, so I just didn't hear the last 2 minutes.
Okay, maybe asking Michael to recap quickly the question.
Yeah. If we decentralize all the data into individual data repositories, right? Businesses also need that data internally as well. For something, let's just say something as practical as a billing system. They have very set time windows, and because part of my previous life was dealing in that world, I know it's extreme. For many, it's very, very tight, right? To extract data for 1 million customers, format it, do all the tax calculations, blah, blah, blah. It's not practical to decentralize it, right?
Yes.
It's not perform. So how do you foresee where we talk about moving the data out, but the data has to stay in as well. So it's still a hybrid model.
Yes, definitely it's hybrid. Your service still have to own the data they require for their job, for their service. Your bank still has your bank data. Your energy consumption must be kept by your energy provider to provide the invoice. Evernote will still store your notes. There's no doubt about that. But the idea is that as soon as you need the service to be across your data,
Smartphone connected, disconnected.
When you need, let's say, your energy provider to anticipate the fact that the withdrawal you will do at the end of the month will be blocked, would you share your data, your bank data, with your energy provider so that he can anticipate this blocking? Of course not. So then the idea is the part of the service which requires sensitive or data which are not relevant to be shared with the service. Then this part of the service is provided within the personal cloud. Then the algorithm of your energy provider can leverage the fact that at the end of the month there will not enough money so that the withdrawal can happen without having to send the data. So you're absolutely right. The idea is not to say that all the data will go into a decentralized system, into your personal silo, but you'll still have the data of the core service, the core job of the service, which will remain hosted by the service. But the cross-silo services requiring more personalization, frictionless experience, then this part of the service can leverage the opportunity of being run into the personal data space. But you're perfectly right. It's an hybrid system.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer, Benjamin. I know that the discussion can last hours again because it's a very interesting topic, but we are already running out of time. So I would like to thank all the participants who have been with us this past almost 2 hours. Thank you very much. And of course, a big thank you for the presenters, Maria, Inés, Benjamin, Nicolas, Jana, and also Chloe. Thank you very much for preparing this session and for doing the presentations and sharing with us what you are, your different project. And thank you to the MyData team for preparing this session with us. Thank you, everyone. Now we have to close this session, but it's not the end because I encourage you to go on Kiko Chat for some highlight. And also, if you want to finish the discussion there, if you have still some questions and you want to ask them to our presenters, it's still possible on Kiko Chat. So thank you very much, everyone.